Tonight we begin with a simple question. How do you conquer the world? In the 13th century, you had these massive ancient empires and kingdoms, all convinced they were the center of the universe, protected by huge armies and walls they believed were unbreakable. But out on the empty, windswept plains of Mongolia, something new was brewing. A force that wouldn't just challenge the old world, but completely shatter it. Before we deep dive into the history, my name is Boris, and I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what was the best part of your day? Feel free to share it in the comments below. And if you find comfort or curiosity in these calm history journeys, consider giving the video a like and maybe even subscribing for more. Now, settle in. Let's drift gently into the past. Now, this new force was led by one man, an outcast in his own land, who managed to unite the scattered, warring nomads of the steppe. They were outnumbered in almost every fight. They went up against armies with better tech and besieged cities that had been standing for 1,000 years. And yet, they were unstoppable. So how did they do it? How did a nomadic people, with no cities, no big factories, and a population smaller than modern-day Cleveland, Ohio, build the largest single land empire in human history? This is the story of how brilliant organization, ruthless tactics, and a revolutionary way of looking at war allowed Genghis Khan's armies to topple empires and forge a legacy of both terror and connection that changed everything. To get the Mongol storm, you first have to understand the man in the eye of it, Genghis Khan. But he wasn't born a Khan. He was born around 1162 as Temujin, into a world of constant, brutal conflict. The Mongolian steppe wasn't a country. It was a chaotic mess of feuding tribes where alliances lasted about as long as a rainstorm and survival was a full-time job. Temujin was the son of a minor chieftain, and legend says he was born clutching a clot of blood in his fist, which, in Mongol tradition, was basically a neon sign flashing "Future Warlord here." But that noble blood didn't help much when he was 9. His father was poisoned by rivals, and in the cold math of steppe politics, a clan without a strong leader was just dead weight. Their own people abandoned Temujin, his mother, and his siblings, leaving them on the plains. It was less, "We're moving to the suburbs," and more, "Here's a patch of dirt, try not to die." They were reduced to fishing and digging for roots. This part of his life was the furnace that forged his character. It taught him patience and the brutal reality of power. It was during this time that he famously killed his own half-brother over a dispute about a fish. Family dynamics were intense. He was even captured and enslaved by the very clan that had ditched his family, forced to wear a wooden collar, the ultimate symbol of humiliation. But he escaped, and that's where his legend really starts to build. In this world, alliances were everything. Temujin's first big move was marrying Berta, which connected him to her powerful tribe. But this is the steppe, so of course, she was immediately kidnapped by a rival tribe. For Temujin, this wasn't a setback, it was an opportunity. He called in an old favor his dad had with a powerful leader named Togrul, and he teamed up with his childhood friend and blood brother, Jamuka. Together, they raised an army, crushed the rival tribe, and rescued Berta. This was his first real taste of command, and it was a massive success. Suddenly, he wasn't just some survivor, he was a leader. But what made Temujin different was his vision. Other guys fought for loot or to settle old scores. Temujin was building something. He started ignoring old traditions, like valuing noble blood over everything. Instead, he promoted guys based on pure skill and loyalty, not because their dad was some famous dude. On the steppe, this was basically corporate treason. He was creating a new kind of tribe, loyal to him. This, inevitably, led to problems. His best friend, Jamuka, a guy who loved the old ways, saw this and thought, this is not the vibe. Their friendship soured into a bitter rivalry and finally, all-out war. For years, Temujin fought a series of campaigns against every other tribe out there, including the one that killed his father. He was ruthless, often executing enemy leaders, but he was also smart, folding their warriors into his own growing army. By 1205, he'd beaten them all. The endless cycle of civil war was over. In 1206, a great council of all the chiefs, a Kurultai, was called. There, they named Temujin the sole ruler and gave him a new title, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The Mongol nation was born, and now this unified force, under one man's will, started looking past the grasslands towards the giant empires that surrounded them. Unifying the tribes was one thing, but to conquer the world, Genghis Khan needed a new kind of army. He took the raw material of the steppe, the tough, independent nomad on a horse, and engineered it into the most disciplined and mobile military machine the world had ever seen. Before Genghis, steppe armies were a chaotic mess of clans loyal to their local chief. Genghis knew this was a bug, not a feature. His fix? The decimal system. It's so simple, it's brilliant. The whole army and all of society was organized into units of 10. An arban was 10 men, a zun was 100, a mingan was 1,000, and a tumen was a division of 10,000. But this wasn't just about math. He deliberately broke up the old tribes and scattered their members across these new units. A guy from one tribe might be serving with men he was trying to kill just a few years earlier. It was a brutal social potluck. Your old identity was gone. Your loyalty was now to your unit, up a chain of command that led straight to the Khan. Discipline was absolute. If one man in an arban deserted, all 10 were executed. It's what you might call a strong incentive to stay put. This harsh legal code, the yasa, transformed a bunch of feuding nomads into a single controllable fighting force. The foundation of this army was the individual warrior. A Mongol man was more comfortable on a horse than on his own 2 feet. Walking was just a brief, awkward pause between rides, and his main weapon was the Mongol composite bow. This wasn't just a bent stick with a string, it was a high-tech piece of laminated horn, wood, and sinew. It was small enough to use from a horse, but powerful enough to punch through a knight's armor from a distance. He also carried an axe, a saber, and a lance with a hook for yanking guys off their saddles. For armor, they wore hardened leather and famously silk undershirts. This is one of those details that sounds made up, but it's absolutely genius. If an arrow got through your armor, the silk wouldn't tear. It would wrap around the arrowhead, allowing you to pull the arrow out cleanly. It turned a fatal wound into something unpleasant but survivable. And then there was his horse. They rode these small, sturdy, absolutely unkillable horses. They were the Toyota Hilux of the 13th century equine world. Each warrior had 3 to 5 of them, so they could switch mounts and cover up to 100 miles in a day, a speed that was just unthinkable for other armies who were bogged down with supply wagons. The Mongols were their own supply line. Their MREs were dried meat and kurut, basically powdered yogurt you add water to. Not delicious, but impressively immune to spoilage, and in a real pinch, they'd open a vein on their horse's neck for a drink before closing it up. You know, as one does. The Mongols' battlefield tactics were a science of deception and psychological pressure, perfected in their annual great hunt, the Nurj. This was less a hunt and more a massive military drill. A huge line of horsemen would form a circle miles wide and slowly drive every animal inward over weeks, coordinating with flags and signals. It was the exact same skill set they used to trap and annihilate entire armies. Their signature move was the feigned retreat. It was a masterpiece of discipline and psychological warfare. Light cavalry would attack, then pretend to break and run. Time and time again, proud, overconfident knights and heavy cavalry would fall for it, breaking formation to chase them down. This was the trap. The Mongols would lead them on a long, exhausting chase, and then, at a signal, the fleeing Mongols would turn around, fresh and ready, while hidden heavy cavalry smashed into the enemy's flanks. A confident charge would turn into a slaughterhouse. But their most powerful weapon was probably fear itself. Their policy was simple: surrender and live, resist and be utterly destroyed. For cities that resisted, the punishment was designed to be a message. They would conduct calculated, systematic massacres, letting a few survivors escape to spread the terrifying stories. Tales of pyramids of skulls weren't just battlefield rumors. They were a deliberate, cold-blooded strategy designed to break the enemy's will to fight before the battle even started. As horsemen, the Mongols initially had no idea how to deal with giant walled cities. But their greatest strength was their ability to learn. They were masters at absorbing the technology of the people they conquered. They started collecting engineers and craftsmen from China and Persia, who were then convinced to build the most advanced siege weapons of the day. Suddenly, the Mongol horde had trebuchets, catapults, and siege towers. They became experts at siegecraft, even diverting rivers to flood cities. And holding this all together was the Yam, the Mongol Pony Express. It was a network of relay stations with fresh horses and supplies that stretched across the empire. A messenger could ride at full speed, swapping for a fresh horse at each station, allowing information and orders to travel thousands of miles with incredible speed. It was the invisible nervous system that held the whole conquest together. With this perfected war machine, Genghis Khan turned west to the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia. What happened next was a demonstration of everything the Mongols had mastered. It started with trade. But the Shah of Khwarezmia made a fatal mistake. His governor at the city of Otrar accused a Mongol caravan of being spies and had them executed. When Genghis sent envoys to have a very reasonable "what the hell" chat, the Shah killed the lead envoy. This was less a diplomatic incident and more hitting the big red "invade me now" button. In 1221, Genghis unleashed his army. In a move of pure strategic genius, he personally led a column through the Kizil-Kum desert, which everyone thought was impassable, and popped up deep in the enemy's heartland. It completely shattered the Shah's entire defense. The great cities of the Islamic world fell one by one. The governor of Otrar, the guy who started it all, was reportedly executed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears. Now, historians love to debate if that actually happened, but it tells you everything you need to know about the stories people were telling. Within 2 years, the Khwarezmian Empire was basically deleted from history. The Mongol tide swept on, into Russia and into Europe. They crushed Polish, German, and Hungarian armies. Europe seemed to be next. But then the great Khan, Ogedei, died back in Mongolia. All the princes had to go back to elect a new leader, and the armies withdrew, never to return with that same force. The empire wasn't invincible. The jungles of Southeast Asia and the island of Japan proved too much for their cavalry. 2 invasion fleets sent to Japan were wrecked by a combination of fierce resistance and 2 massive, perfectly timed typhoons, which the Japanese understandably called kamikaze, or divine winds. Their advance was finally stopped for good in 1260 at the Battle of Ain Jalut. An army of Mamluk soldiers from Egypt, who were also expert horsemen, refused to be baited by the feigned retreat. They basically used the Mongols' own playbook against them, which is the ultimate "know-you" in military history. The myth of Mongol invincibility was broken. So the legacy of Genghis Khan is complicated. On one hand, it was an apocalypse on horseback, responsible for the deaths of millions and the destruction of entire cultures. On the other hand, by uniting this vast territory, they created the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. For the first time, the Silk Road was safe from end to end. It was said a young woman could walk across the empire with a gold nugget on her head and not be bothered. This new security sparked a massive exchange of goods and ideas: gunpowder, the compass, printing, that flowed from east to west and helped light the fuse for the European Renaissance. They weren't just destroyers, they were connectors. The story of the Mongol Empire is a powerful look at how a singular vision and a revolutionary, ruthless strategy can completely change the world. From an outcast boy to the ruler of the largest land empire ever, Genghis Khan's legacy is a complex tapestry of pure brutality and unexpected connection. We want to hear from you guys. What aspect of the Mongol army do you find most impressive or most terrifying? Was it the decimal system, the skill of the warrior, or their psychological tactics? Let us know in the comments below. A day in the life of a Mongolian Empire city dweller. Forget for a moment the endless wind-swept steppe and the thundering hooves of a conquering horde. I want you to imagine something else, something far more complex. A city. What if I told you that in the late 13th century, the Mongols were presiding over one of the most cosmopolitan and meticulously planned cities on Earth? We're not talking about Karakorum, the old capital deep in the Mongolian heartland. We're talking about a new city, built to be the nerve center for a new kind of empire. This was Khanbalik, the city of the Khan, known today as Beijing. This was the capital of Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty. So how do we understand what they built? What was it like to actually live in the world they created? To get a sense of that, we're not going to follow a Khan or a general. We are going to follow an ordinary man, a young craftsman, through a single day in this extraordinary city. So before you get comfortable, maybe take a moment to subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. The first light of dawn has yet to touch the rooftops of Khanbalik, but the city is already breathing. My name is Altan, and like thousands of others here, my day begins not with the sun, but with the pulse of the empire. The air in our small home is thick with the smell of last night's coal and the sharp, comforting scent of yak butter. A distant temple bell tolls. From another direction, a muezzin's call to prayer drifts over the rooftops. I light a small oil lamp, and the day begins. Our home is not a ger, the felt tent of my grandparents. We live within the city's massive earthen walls, in a house of brick and wood built around a small courtyard. My father, Batu, says the great Khan, Kublai, wanted his people to put down roots here, to trade their saddles for foundations. It was a major shift. The old capital, Karakorum, was for the steppe. Khanbalik was for ruling an empire of cities and farms. My mother, Sorka, rises with me. She churns tea in a wooden cylinder, mixing it with milk and a knob of salty yak butter. It's a taste of the grasslands, a reminder of who we are, even in this city of Han Persians and 100 other peoples. We eat our steaming millet porridge in near silence, the only sounds the scrape of our spoons and the growing murmur of the city. On a small shelf in our main room sits a carved wooden idol of Tengri, the eternal blue sky. But right next to it is a small, serene-looking Buddha my mother got from a Han merchant. The great Khan himself is famously pragmatic about religion. He was known to have said, "There are 4 great prophets who are reverenced. The Christians regard Jesus Christ as their divinity, the Saracens, Mahomet, the Jews, Moses, and the idolaters, Sogomomba Khan. I do honor and show respect to all the 4. That's because this tolerance is the law of the empire, and it's the reality of our street. It's less a matter of deep spiritual belief and more a practical tool for managing a vast, diverse population. Our neighbors to the left burn incense for their ancestors. To the right, a family of Uyghur merchants prays towards Mecca. We live in peace because the Khan demands it, and because trade, the lifeblood of this city, requires it. My father, Batu, joins us. His hands are his fortune. He is a master silversmith, and I am his apprentice. He looks at my work from yesterday, a small belt buckle, turning it over. He grunts, which can mean anything from adequate to passable. The emissary from the Golden Horde is expecting the saddle fittings today, he says. They must be perfect. We cannot afford mistakes. With that, we're out the door. We live in one of the gridded neighborhoods, our narrow lane, or hutong, connecting to wider streets. The word hutong itself, some say, is a leftover from our language, a Mongolian word for a water well, because that's what these communities were built around. The avenues are wide enough for 9 chariots to ride abreast. Everything here is built on a scale that is meant to awe. We are just 2 drops in a river of humanity flooding the streets of Kanbalik. Our workshop is a small space in a district teeming with artisans. The great Khan knows our value. Under his grandfather, Genghis Khan, craftsmen were seen as prizes of war. When a city was conquered, soldiers might be put to the sword, but the artisans, weavers, potters, metalworkers, were spared and sent where the empire needed them. They were given tax benefits and freed from unpaid labor. That's because the Mongols, a people with no real artisan class of their own, understood that to build an empire, you needed builders. This policy has made our district a world unto itself. The clang of my father's hammer is answered by the thumping of a Persian carpet weaver and the scraping of a Chinese jade carver. It's a symphony of creation, a testament to the Pax Mongolica, the great peace that allows a man to travel from Baghdad to this city in relative safety. My father has a partner, a man named Rashid, a Muslim from Samarkand. Rashid is a master of filigree, twisting fine silver wire into delicate lace. In return, my father taught him our way of casting the powerful animal figures, wolves, falcons, dragons, that our patrons love. It's an exchange, a quiet diplomacy in silver and fire. The fire altan, hotter, Rashid says. The Persian silver is purer, it requires more persuasion. He winks. He and my father argue constantly about technique, but it's an argument of respect. This workshop, like Kanbalik itself, is a melting pot. We melt metals, and in doing so, we melt our cultures. The designs are a fusion, the powerful lines of the steppe, the intricate geometry of the Islamic world, and the subtle elegance of the Han Chinese. Today's task is the saddle fittings. It is a status symbol, a declaration of wealth. I spend hours at the bellows, my arms aching, my face slick with sweat. Then comes the fine work. Rashid uses a fine chisel to chase a delicate vine pattern, a touch of Persia. My father then uses a heavier punch to create the central image, a snarling wolf, an ancient totem of our people. The contrast is the story of our empire in metal, raw power contained by sophisticated beauty. Our patron rules a land thousands of miles away. He traveled here under the protection of the Khan's law and the efficiency of the Yam, the imperial post station system. A letter or a man can travel from here to the edges of Europe with a speed that would have been unimaginable a century ago. This silver fitting isn't just an object, it's a product of a globalized world made possible by the Mongol peace. By midday, the forge is unbearable. My father sends me on an errand, pressing a few crumpled pieces of paper into my hand. The Venetian is at the main market. Take this clasp to him. Do not let him haggle. The paper is chow, the official currency of the Yuan dynasty. It's made from mulberry bark, printed with intricate designs and stamped with the great Khan's red seal. Marco Polo, the Venetian my father mentioned, was apparently stunned when he first saw it, amazed an empire could run on something so light, backed only by the Khan's authority. Of course, when the court prints too much to pay for its projects, our money is worth less, a problem our elders whisper about. But it worked. Stepping into the main market is like stepping into another world. The design of our city, following Chinese principles, places the markets in the northern part. This isn't just a place to buy food. This is the commercial heart of Eurasia. I see a caravan of dusty camels being unloaded by Turkic men, their cargo smelling of spices from the south. There are Han merchants selling bolts of shimmering silk and men from the northern forests haggling over piles of sable and fox fur. The air is thick with the smell of roasting mutton, sweet incense, and animal dung. I trade a small note for a skewer of lamb and a warm, flat shobing bread. The food here is a map of the empire. Mutton and dairy from my people, noodles from the Han, spices and cooking techniques from the Persians. I see a crowd gathered around a city official. He isn't reading from a grand scroll of the Yasa, the so-called secret law code of Genghis Khan. It's more mundane than that. He's loudly reminding a merchant of a specific rule, that it's forbidden to pollute running water, a principle derived from the old laws. A man in scholar's robes next to me mutters that the laws are harsh, but they create order. Under these laws, theft is punished severely, but the same system protects the envoys and merchants who are the city's lifeblood. There's a hierarchy, of course. A Han who kills a Mongol faces death. A Mongol who kills a Han might only pay a fine. It's a constant reminder of who is in charge. I find the Venetian stall. Marco Polo is a strange sight, with his pale face and prominent nose, but he speaks our language with a thick, confident accent. He examines the belt clasp, his blue eyes sharp. "Good," he says. "Your father is a true artist." He tries to offer me a lower price, but I stand firm. He laughs and pays the sum in paper notes. He tells me this clasp will secure a book of maps and stories he is compiling. I wonder what his people will think of us, of our city of paper money and clashing cultures. Back at the workshop, the afternoon is for painstaking work, polishing the silver until it gleams. Suddenly, the doorway is filled by two towering figures. They are Keshig, personal bodyguards of a Mongol noble. Behind them, their patron steps into our workshop. It is Aradai, the emissary from the Golden Horde. Instantly, we stop and bow our heads. This is the delicate dance of power. We are valued artisans, but we are commoners. He is of the Golden family, a prince of the empire. He circles the workbench, his face a mask. He picks up a silver plate, tracing the wolf my father carved. "The wolf," he says finally. "It has the spirit of the steppe. It has not been tamed by this city." My father allows a small, respectful smile. "We craft what the heart remembers, my lord." "Good," Aradai nods. "But the vines, this is the work of a Westerner, no?" He glances at Rashid. Rashid bows his head. "A pattern from my home in Samarkand, my lord. A symbol of life and prosperity." Aradai looks at the piece again. The steppe and the city, power and prosperity. A fitting design. It speaks the truth of our empire. He is satisfied. The relief is almost a physical thing. He discusses payment with his attendant, not with my father. Patrons like him don't haggle. His visit is a reminder of the structure of our world. At the top are the Mongols. Below them are their allies and administrators, the Semu Ren, people like Persians, Turks, and Rashid. At the bottom are the Han of northern China, and below them the people of the south. It is a rigid hierarchy, and our life is lived within its rules. After he leaves, the air still seems to hum with his presence. We are small cogs, but our craft gives us a place in the grand machine. As the sun sets, the hammers in our district soften. The walk home is slower. Lamplighters move through the streets, setting a glow to the paper lanterns. We arrive home to find my mother counting a stack of paper notes. In many cultures, this is a man's job. But Mongol women, here as on the steppe, can own property and manage finances. She is the anchor of our family. The evening meal is a kind of hot pot, a dish popular in the city. A pot of simmering broth sits over a charcoal brazier. We dip in thin slices of mutton and vegetables. It's communal, a time to talk. My father speaks of the patron's visit. My mother talks about the rising price of millet. I tell them about the strange Venetian. My father nods. The Khans bring the world to our gates. It makes the city rich, but also complicated. After the meal, our neighbor, a Han scholar, sometimes comes to play his guqin, a 7-stringed instrument, its melodies full of mountains and rivers we have never seen. But tonight, my father takes down his morin khur, the horsehead fiddle that is the soul of our people. He plays a song of the grasslands, of a lone rider under the vast eternal blue sky. For a few moments the brick house melts away. The sounds of Khanbalik fade. We are not city dwellers. We are Mongols. The song is full of a nostalgia for a life he himself has barely lived, but one that runs in his blood. We carry the steppe within us. As the last notes die out, my father looks at me. Tomorrow, he says, you will do the final chasing on the smallest buckle. It is time. It's a small thing, but it's a sign of trust. The day, which began with the pulse of an empire, ends with the quiet hum of a skill passing from one generation to the next. Later, I lie on my sleeping mat, listening to the city. It is never truly silent. The watchman makes his rounds, his wooden clapper echoing in the dark. In short, my day was ordinary, but it was lived on an extraordinary stage. I am not a warrior on horseback. My hands wield a hammer, not a sword. But I, and millions like me, are the empire. We are the artisans who give it beauty, the merchants who give it wealth, and the administrators who give it order. We are the threads of 1,000 colors, woven together on the great loom of the Pax Mongolica. My name is Altan. I am a silversmith in Khanbalik. My world, born from the ferocity of the steppe, is now sustained by the delicate art of a silver fitting and the quiet melody of a horsehead fiddle. This is the other side of the Mongol Empire, not the story of its conquests, but the story of the world it created. An empire is always more than its armies. It's the millions of ordinary lives lived in the peace, however brutal, that they forged. What part of Altan's day stood out to you the most? The paper money, the religious pragmatism, or the fusion of cultures in a single workshop? Let me know in the comments below. It's always fascinating to hear what resonates with you guys.